Ladies and gents, welcome back to Engineers. We've got Julien with us today from ZOE. It's actually the first day of lockdown. You'll probably be listening to this halfway through lockdown, but I think the product's quite fitting. It's all around nutrition and wellness. Okay, so 50% of your way through lockdown. Remember, nutrition and fitness is absolutely key. Julian, do you want to give us an intro into ZOE, your role as VP of Engineering, and the mission behind ZOE? Let's kick off that way. Say a big
Hi,
hello.
Elliot. Hi, Elliot. That's great to be here. So, yes, Zoe, we are a startup based in London. We are building a nutrition product, and the core idea behind what we are building is that we believe that everybody responds to food very, very differently. And Zoe was actually founded 3 years ago now, and spent the first 2+ years doing kind of medical research, so running studies to really try to understand that in depth. And we collaborated with quite a lot of universities and researchers, and particularly KCL in London, and something called the Twin Registry. So one of the very exciting thing we did quite early on is, get people to eat specific food, take a lot of measure about, how they respond to it in terms of glucose or fat in the blood. And in particular, we did that on, I think, 600 or 700 twins. So, for example, one of the things we found out very,
700
very
twins.
early, yes, so one of the things we found out very, very early is actually genetics doesn't play a significant factor. Like it's one factor, but it's not the biggest. So you do find twins responding very, very differently to food, and that led us to kind of continue researching that area and doing quite a lot of stuff on the gut microbiome. And we are now 3 years later and have launched our product in the US. And our product basically, you buy a test kit, a bit like what we did in the study. That test kit is going to contain a CGM device for continuous glucose monitor, some muffins that have like a very specific nutritional value, some blood spot cards so that you can take some blood sample, some stool sample, and you follow a few days a very specific protocol, eating the muffin in the morning, fasting for 3 hours, taking your doing a blood test, send everything back to us, and then we can give you quite a lot of insights about how you responded to the food during this testing period, because you also log all your meals that you have. And more interestingly, beyond the insight, we're going to make you recommendations as to what food are good for you or maybe not as good. And if you wish, we're going to give you an action plan to follow for several weeks, or you can follow for as long as you want, to really try to kind of boost your health by just having a better nutrition.
Okay,
We had quite exciting feedback on those features from the people that are following it.
that's pretty interesting. How many, or is the output different for each person, or do you fall into a category and your diet plan, let's say, follows that way?
So the output is different for different people. I mean, at the end of the day, we score you along three axes, which is how good a responder you are on glucose, on fat, and then how diverse or not your microbiome is, and whether you have specific bacteria. Side note, one of the things we find out is that there is a good parasite that, if you have it, is extremely correlated with being lean, and about a third of the population, I think, in the UK has that parasite.
I don't.
So basically, we take all of that into account, and then we're going to start, making recommendations. So one thing that people have to realize, that it's not a silver bullet. Like there is no one for which eating French fries at every meal is going to be great. That's not true. So French fries will never score very well in our algorithm. But there are definitely people that should favor more carbs or more fat, There are people that are actually quite bad on both, so that eliminates quite a lot of food, and there are people that are quite healthy, so they have like a lot more latitude to eat a bit what they want. So yeah, we just put you on place you on those axes, and basically all our scoring is derived from that. And after that, we've got some general rules, which is overall to have a great day, target a score of 75 for the day, and basically that take into account not only the meals you have but also the sequencing. Because that's something that matters quite a lot. So, for example, blood sugar tends to rise very quickly and decrease very quickly after you eat something, which is not true for fat. Fat kind of builds up during the day, and that probably means that you can actually have quite a reasonable amount of fat per day without that being bad for you, but you probably want to space it. So maybe you have, in the morning and in the evening instead of having, lunchtime and dinner, so that you can actually, your metabolism can actually, process the fat during the two meals. So that's the kind of thing that our algorithm takes into account, and we're constantly improving it.
So you're a nutritionist by day, techie by night.
I'm a noob in nutrition versus all the people in the company. I roughly try to follow what on earth we're doing, but no, there are people that actually know that stuff. I'm not one of them.
No, no, nice. Okay. So what do you do as VP of engineering? Give us some insight into what that role looks like at Zoe.
Yeah, so I think at Zoe that role evolved quite significantly in the last year. As I'm sure all the listeners are very much aware, like VP of Engineering is just a title that doesn't say much. And when I joined a year ago, the engineering team was very small. I think we had like 8 people, something like that. So it's different job from today, where we're reaching the point where we're at 20. But I guess even independently of the size, what I do and what I think is a good description of VP engineering is kind of trying to make sure that the trains arrive on time, that the engineering team is happy, making the link between the leadership team and the technology, and in the last year, basically, there's been a lot about do we work on the right things, or working with the product team, do we build the right technology for it, which is actually very hard in the start because you have to constantly trade off just getting things out of the door with not building too much technical debt. And I'm not sure we've really tackled that. Building the team, so I think we almost doubled in the last 4 months. So that's I had like 70 interviews in the span of 6 weeks at some point. um,
70.
something like that. I have the stats somewhere. Yeah, it was,
Nice.
a bit crazy. But yeah, so you do whatever it takes. As a small startup, but with a strong focus on trying to just get leverage for other people to actually do the work, and trying to align them. But I do sometimes still write a bit of code, mostly because I've been there for a year, and therefore I actually have quite a lot of context, which is quite relevant for solving a small problem here and there, or at least I could do it a lot faster than other people that joined very very recently. So I'm trying to teach them the stuff I do, but hopefully not too much, because that's not really what the job is about in theory.
I like
That's
that.
a good example of just you do whatever it takes.
I like that. Why do you think the product part and not building technical debt is tough? Is it your specific product and I guess kits that you're offering to people, or is it generally that's quite a tough thing?
No, I suspect that's a general thing, in the sense you are in an environment where you need to learn very very quickly, and the typical example is that we launch our product at the beginning of August, and that was following the big push that we did on the COVID Symptom Study app. Maybe we'll talk about that. So We ended up launching something that was really imperfect. And I think we've followed one of the Silicon Valley mantra, which is if you're not a little bit ashamed of your product at the time you launch it, then you're probably launching it too late. And I think we're certainly at that point in terms of being able to scale the operations, in the sense a lot of things were still manual, and a lot of things are still manual. Like, literally people copy pasting a number from one spreadsheet to another because the systems have not been linked together. But then you've got this constant trade-off, which is on one side, you do want to sell your product more, but the more you sell it, if it's not automated, the more manual work you have.
Yeah.
And then you want to kind of automate it as much as you can. But those two things kind of pull in a slightly different direction, at least in the short term. And you're like, oh, the right way to automate it would be to do that way. Sure, but that way is going to take whatever 3 weeks. So that 3 weeks where we have to keep doing things manually, and someone run the job, or doing something every day. Okay, is there a way where we can just have it faster? Great, but now we're probably going to incur some form of like that, and it's just very, very hard to know where to put the trade-off. I think when you're in a very established place where your product, your product is going to evolve, but not drastically. It's just kind of small increment. You have quite a bit of visibility on what's going to happen, and therefore it's not too hard to plan. Where you generally don't know if 3 months from now you're just not going to make like a massive pivot that just means you can erase 30% of what you did in the last 2 months. Then suddenly, what do you try to optimize for? Like, does it matter if those 30% are really great? Well, not if they're deleted.
How do you know what is market fit and what isn't market fit, and where to prioritize spending time?
You mean in terms of product market fit?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think one definition I've heard of product market fit, which I find quite interesting, is when the market is pulling you so much that you can't deliver. So there's just a lot more people that want to buy your product that you can actually sell it, whether it's physical or digital. So of course, if you're in the world of digital, it's probably easier because you can scale with the cloud or etc. But even that is not necessarily true, right? Your architecture will have some limits, and there's probably still again things that need to happen manually behind the scene, and not enough people to do it. So I think that's one of the definition I've heard in the past that I like quite a lot, because it doesn't mention customer value, but it is implied. As in, you would not have all that demand if people did not find value in your product. Um, and for me, that's really the intersection of the two, which is not only you need to provide value to your customers, but you can only say, I think, that you find product market fit if you find a market that is big enough. Like, it's easy to provide value to 5 people. You can do something extremely targeted for them. But 1 million people, different story.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And talking about some of those points of optimization, pivoting, talk to us about the COVID symptom study. That was a pretty impressive story. I think it's got to be March, April time. Just off the top of my head, just following you guys on LinkedIn, seeing what you'd built within, I think, 24, 36 hours, you hit 1 million users or 1 million downloads. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about those conversations where you were like, let's do something, let's have an impact, and how you turn that around to actually delivering something.
Yeah, so I think as context, I think something we all believe at ZOE is having a positive impact for the world. And at the core of what we're doing is we're trying to improve people's nutrition, and their general awareness. And yeah, we are in March. I think the lockdown has just started, so everybody's is not in a very good mood, and the news is just terrible. And one of the things that we had for us is that we had run those medical studies, and we had worked with quite a lot of people around the world, universities, and again KCL. And KCL, more or less the same thing is happening for them. They're not at that point doing any research on COVID, but they're attached to St Thomas Hospital. Things are going very very badly there, and they're like, well, how can we help? Well, let's do research on COVID, and especially with our database of twins, we have a very interesting data set. Basically, this twin registry are some of the most studied people in the world. They're been doing every possible medical study that you can imagine. So it was very interesting from the perspective to say, let's see, let's try that cohort of people and let's see how they respond to COVID in general, see if we can detect any pattern. And at that point, Tim Spector, which is one of our founder, but also professor at KCL and kind of leading the twins department, talk to us, Jonathan, the CEO of ZOE, me, and say like, it would be great if we could build an app to just track people's symptoms because that's the one thing we don't understand. And we're like, yeah, let's give it a try because is there anything more important than that at the moment? So it's like, great, we are Thursday morning. Can I have it for tomorrow evening, please?
Yeah, cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're like, well, you know what? Let's give it a try. So at that point, we kind of assembled a team like really hackathon style, and I think I had the first conversation with Jonathan at 9 a.m. In the morning because that was being discussed during the morning with team him and other people at KCL. So, reach out to my team and say, hey, is there anyone that if that happens, is there anyone that want to participate in this kind of hackathon where we're going to try to build that up? And a few people volunteer because everybody, as I said, was very down with COVID, and everybody wanted to help, and it felt like
Yeah.
one of the way we could. So at noon, we actually got a proper brief with two people from KCL, including Claire Stevens, that is kind of leading the research side. And yeah, we started to build the thing, and with this idea that we wanted to really have something ready in 36 hours. So there was not a lot of sleep, but on Friday evening towards midnight, we reached a point where we had something that was good enough to submit to the App Store and the Play Store. And interestingly, because actually I think we're not necessarily super experienced with that, but what took us the longest amount of time, even though we exercised a lot of pressure, was to get the app approved, because both Apple and Google were super careful about having any apps talking about COVID, and for good reasons. Like this is a very easy way to drive
Yeah.
people to do wrong things. So we spent the weekend just activating our network in every possible way to try to get the app out of the door. What we had for us was the support from leading research universities that could literally put write papers and write letters on on the university paper and say we're supporting that. This has ethic approvals, and we launch it the next Tuesday morning.
Love that.
My team going Tim was going to be live on BBC Radio. It was cancelled 15 minutes before, so we were all pissed off about it. Say, "Oh, that's a shame," but he started tweeting about it, and for the first few hours, it was like, "Yes, quite a few people
Yeah.
are retweeting, etc." Then it really kind of started to bubble up, and we ended up at the end of the day with 200,000 people having the app installed, which was like already um, tons more than we were expecting.
Yeah.
And the next day, basically, the press just it took 24 hours for the press to notice.
Yeah.
So all the online newspaper started to have headlines about it the next morning. I think at 8:50, the whole system was down on the load. So at 8:50, we had already more traffic than any point in the 24 hours before, which was still quite early in the day. But we got around that, and then we ended up at the end of the day with 1 million people indeed having the app installed and logging their symptoms.
What a story. And what an unbelievable achievement for such a small team, and what that will do for your brand going forward, that you can pivot, turn something around, deliver it, have such a big impact. That's great for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has been exciting, especially when you think that the initial team was 6 people, 4 engineers, two across the backend, two across the mobile app, one UX designer, and Jonathan, our CEO, that was kind of doing the link with the scientists, but also with the legals.
Yeah,
So that was a small team, but as we quickly find out when we launch, I know 36 hours before, this small team of 6 turned into 40 people. Because now, when you've got a product that is just used by 1 million people, and literally your brand is on the line,
yeah,
then it's literally all hands on deck. And I mean, we took like such a massive amount of shortcut to release the app. Like, the app was not great in any way. So we had like God knows how many people emailing us, tweeting on Instagram, everything you want. So for the first 2 3 weeks, I think there was like 10 people just replying to social media and
oh
emails
wow.
non-stop, 8 hours a day. The whole engineering team pivoted to that almost overnight. So it's been, yeah, and quite interesting, but not without stress and not without consequences, both positive also negative, because that's great to do that, right? That helps, but that doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And was it just a symptom study, understanding what symptoms are happening around the world?
Yeah, so basically the app, when you install it, you're gonna fill your profile. So give us information about your age, your weight, where do you live, any medical antecedent that you have, all those kind of things. And then on a daily basis, you can report your symptoms. Do you have fever? Are you coughing? Do you have loss of smell or taste? And all those things. And this is, for many months, that was really, really unidirectional.
Yeah.
You were giving us data. That data was fed to plenty of research institutions. That data goes on Sir Patrick Valiant's desk every single morning.
Wow. Okay.
We had like a we actually had like a Zoom call with him, the whole team that worked on COVID, about 2 weeks ago, and he was telling all of us that every morning I look at your data. It's a PDF that I open. I have specific things that I look. So that is very, very important. Very important data source for plenty of organization, and a lot of research has been built on top of it. But it has been very unidirectional, in the sense you were giving that data, and the only kind of feedback loop was, hey, several weeks later, there is a research paper or some kind of discovery that you'll probably know little about. Since then, we've added a lot more content back to kind of explain to people what we're doing, but we also maybe 2 months or 1 month after launching the app, started publishing our own trends that at the beginning were the best you could have in the UK, because the testing regime was just not there. Still today, we have our charts are published on newspaper on a weekly basis, and and you can access those directly in the app. So yeah,
You
with a lot
you
of
should
people.
have yeah, you should have thrown your hat in for the track and trace. I think, and seen what that have done. That would have been quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because they're trying to optimize for, I guess, a slightly different things. And for us, the goal was just ship something ASAP. Do not try to be perfect. And I think for them, they had like a specific set of constraints where they were aiming for something like a lot more complicated, handling a lot more edge cases and etc. And yeah, that was just a very, very, very different product. But one of the things we really struggled with at the beginning is that, well, very quickly, everybody at NHSX, which is the kind of institution that was building that app, were pretty much aware of what we're doing, because it was suddenly used by 1 million people and all over the press. And there was a lot of resistance. And we've tried to build bridges for the first few weeks, but that was just not working. It's a lot better now, because actually the work we do on the COVID symptom study is now government funded. So I think it was about 2-3 months ago, we actually received a grant to continue running it. So that's kind of show the value that the government is
Amazing.
getting from that, because we could not have continued doing it. It just costs too much money to run if we do it by ourselves. We just we don't have. We're just starting to get revenue. We certainly cannot spend 4 million a year running the COVID symptom study app.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Good. And it's interesting to understand, obviously, the heavy science influence that you've got on the products that you've built, whether that's personal analysis or DNA analysis, to some of the models that you've built through the first 2 years, or the research centers or partners that you've got. I'm keen to understand, where does technology, or where do the two meet? Let's just say science and technology with ZOE. I'm quite keen to understand that.
Yeah, so it is an interesting challenge that we have, in the sense, on one side you've got this kind of core science, and we're working with scientists, people that work in universities and really understand nutrition. And we basically link them with data scientists that going to run a lot of analysis on the data that we collected. But you really have this kind of loop where the scientist, which really knows that stuff better than we do, kind of come up with what would be good experiment to run, what would be good medical studies. Great, let's build whatever is required. And one reason we've managed to run those nutrition study is because we build an app to actually help people to kind of log their meals and etc. And it seems very obvious, but actually, for the people who are working in university background, like, they had no capacity to do that. Like, for them, a big nutrition study was like 30 people. So when we offered to do it on 1,000 people, that was like totally new for them. So we really have this kind of loop where scientists kind of tell us what needs to what are good things to look for. We build the software for it. We kind of onboard the people in the study to gather that data. We get the data back. We get our own team of data scientists that start doing analysis, and then share the finding with the scientific team, scientific advisory board, and then we kind of just continue. But where that gets interesting and complicated is that the science part, the time horizon, is long, at least for a startup. Like this is the research we do now will take months to land into the product. And on the other side, you've got the more product people that obviously are aware of all the science, but really what they want is an improvement to the user experience, like next week. And in the middle, you've got engineering that is spreading its resource across those two very, very different time horizons. So that is an interesting challenge, and I think that's something that we've not fully tackled yet.
Yeah.
In the sense, in some way, we still have those two parts a bit disconnected, and I think we need to be better at actually really doing the core science on the one thing our customers are telling us now, and really trying to try it very, very quickly. But it's going to be a lot easier now that we've launched, because for a long time, the feedback we're getting was that the people doing the medical study. And at least in my mind, I always thought it was a bit different. Doing a medical study, you invest your time, but not your money. When you buy something, your expectation change a bit. And now we're at that point where actually the people we're talking to are the people that actually bought a product. So the feedback we get, I think, is is more targeted and more interesting.
Those points, just trying to understand, I guess, that journey from the science through to product and the technology that you're building. I can imagine an engineering team that has to be outward facing from both perspectives, almost data science, data engineering, software engineering, and that relationship between the three. I can imagine that's tough.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You are pulled in different directions, and I think one of the things that we did not achieve very well in the past was actually serve and provide good service to our data scientists, to the point our data scientists can build a lot of things themselves because we're a lot more focused into other part and more kind of building the product. But it is something we need to improve. And as I said, I think one of the solutions is just being a lot more cross-functional, as in trying to get a lot more of the data science also building things that are going to be used next week or next month's top in the app. And we've started doing that a few months ago, whereas before you really had, as I said, this very very two different time horizon, and in that case, there is no great way to prioritize. Is It's hard to know if it's more important to focus on the thing that's going to make the app better next week, but at the cost of not developing the kind of core science that could actually make the app like a big hit, but only 3 or 6 months from now. And how do you balance that? I don't think there is like a perfect answer. It's a bit like a gut feeling, b a lot of conversation with the various stakeholders, and trying to find something that works for everybody.
When you say core science, is that the analysis and the models that you've got? Do you mean? And is it just being able to get more data and translating that into better products? Is that what you mean?
So it's not only getting more data; it's just spending more time analyzing the data that we have, because it's just extremely complicated, overall. So you've got all those people that did the study, and they log their food, and you've got their CGM tray. So you have their glucose across the day, for example, and there's so many aspects you could look at. So for example, at one point we spent quite a lot of time looking at timing, as in, does it make a big difference to eat things in a specific order or with specific amount of space between it. But another data set that we've got some access to and actually didn't do that much is the relationship between CGM traces and sleep.
Okay.
Do you process food better when you're well rested or not well rested? Yeah, maybe it wouldn't be surprising that you process food better if you're well rested, but does the data actually tell us that?
Okay.
So there's just like that could lead. That's a research project that could literally lead to nothing, as in we can't find anything. At best, we need to gather more data. At worst, it's just a total waste of time because there is no
Yeah.
correlation. Um,
Okay. I get that. That's quite interesting. If let's just say we roll the clock forward some months. I don't know in terms of deployment what you're thinking about the US. You might tell me in the next couple of moments. Let's just say you roll out to the US, influxes of data come in to your scientists. What technical challenges do you think you might see or the team are anticipating to come?
So we are actually launching in the US, in the sense from the
Okay.
very beginning we decided that it was a better market to launch than the UK
Okay.
because it's a bigger market. So the thought process is going from one market to another is non-trivial, especially for us where there is a lot of legal aspect related to managing health data and etc. So from the very beginning, we're like, let's go in the bigger market that we can, actually access. So for us, it was the US. Now, obviously, probably India or China are bigger, but they're just not markets that we feel we can actually, operate in for plenty of reasons.
Yep.
So we actually did that, and the first thing is that for us the bottleneck is physical, because our product is a mix of physical and digital products. So we have to literally ship the kit to people. That requires quite a bit of logistic, because we send the kit to people. So the kit needs to be assembled. You actually need to get a bakery to cook the muffins and send them to and send them. And then we start, receiving the data back. And right now we've got a big bottleneck in terms of operations and software for operations. So we're actually not worried about having this kind of crazy growth, because we are rate limiting at the moment the numbers of kits we are selling, because we know we're not ready yet. But we know we could sell the kit a lot more than we could, than we are at the moment. But so the two things that tells me is that the growth is going to be controlled in our case, or at least for quite a bit of time, I suspect. Now the technical challenge are actually more about what I've described in the short term, in the sense building all the toolings for running that product at scale. So minimizing the amount of manual work. So the data we get back, if we put aside the sequencing of the microbiome, is not huge. And I've definitely worked with data sets that are actually significantly bigger. So sequencing of your microbiome, those files are a few gigabytes, but basically you run some software on it once, and then you're probably not going to touch them for quite some time. Um, and that's quite specific and aside from everything else. So dealing with the influx of data is not necessarily the big challenge. There are plenty of things we need to do better there, than we are. Like basically, we are reprocessing almost everything every time we run anything, and that's a bit stupid. We can just do it on an incremental basis.
Yeah.
But building the software for managing that is actually quite hard, because it's all about logistics and dealing with all the exception cases, such as you're sending a CGM device to
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah.
What if that someone break the CGM device? Well, you have to resend the second one, and you don't want to track that in an Excel spreadsheet. So lots
It's
of
all
software.
that eventuality. Yeah, it's all those eventualities of what could happen with this person's product if it gets lost, resending, like you said. Okay, interesting. In regards to tech stack, do you want to just give us some insight into maybe the tools that you chose that you think are right?
Yeah, I think our tech stack is quite standard. So we run on GCP, which is, I guess, a bit less common than AWS, but we're generally happy with it. A lot of the software we write is in Python, which is not a big surprise, since there is a lot of data science into what we do. So it started with your classical data science stack around Jupyter Notebook and all the Python libraries, scikit-learn, and etc. All of that runs on Kubernetes. We are using frameworks such as Django to write the backend. Our front end on Intuition side is for the mobile app is full native. And that's something that we've learned with the COVID Symptom Study app, that we want to change. The COVID Symptom Study app is in React Native, so it's not full native, and that's been a really, really good experience, to the point that we actually want to write our mobile apps in React Native and only have one code base.
Nice.
Um, Database, pretty standard Postgres. As I said, we run some kind of quite intensive compute stuff for the microbiome analysis, but that's mostly open source and academic software that we run just directly on VM, just because actually running them in Docker and Kubernetes means it's 20% slower.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the only time where actually we have like really, really interesting performance problems. So fundamentally, nothing exciting. Quite standard setup.
Why the GCP move instead of the AWS move? I don't say that as a loaded question or with an opinion. I'm just curious because um, I've seen that a couple of times recently. I'm just curious as to why that decision.
Yeah, so that decision actually predates my arrival at ZOE. So I have little context, but what I know from it is that at the point where we did move, the reasoning was the toolings around AI was a bit more mature on GCP than at AWS. Generally, have no idea if that's true or not. I would say that we're generally happy with GCP overall. Um, it does some stuff very well. I mean, we're relying a lot on communities, and the offering there is very mature. That's very nice. For the COVID symptom study app, we used App Engine, and that's also working quite well. Um, I think the support you get from a commercial point of view has been a significant disappointment, which is interesting because that's something I've been exposed to in the press, but only discovered about it more recently. And I think they made some change at the head of GCP level, where they brought people that actually were used to dealing with enterprise customers, whereas before it sounded a bit like, well, GCP is great technology, but not necessarily a great sales organization. So it's probably the only company we work with on the COVID symptom study app that just did not offer significant help. Everybody else did. Like we had like just random people from everywhere offering their help, and GCP was like, "Yeah, fill that form, and we'll get back to you in 3 months."
Great.
Thank
Yeah, cheers. Thank you. Thank you. Um, you've obviously given us some really good insight into the mission launching in the US. There will be growth. So, if people are listening, and as you know, we've spoken about some of the figures, we get a lot of listens, there'll be people that will no doubt be interested. What do you look for when you're looking at engineers? What do you look for? How do you calibrate engineers? I'm interested to understand that mindset for people that are thinking about applying.
Yes. So I think we look for a mix of things. We are not particularly interested about frameworks or languages. We're a lot more interested about the kind of fundamental of computer science, on how do you approach a problem. So our interview process is quite standard for tech companies. Basically, you can have some kind of phone screen, which is going to be a bit like, let's write a bit of code. Can you write a bit of code? And we know this is imperfect on the phone, especially over VC, but still, that's very interesting to see. Can you walk us through some problems that we think is not particularly complicated, and tell us how you think about it, and let's try to collaborate towards a solution. So I think collaboration is a thing we're definitely looking for a lot in our interviews. And then the process evolves towards basically every time you go higher one level, reaching system design, and especially for senior people, system design is something we weight very very heavily. So if I give you like a very broad problem, how would you build a Google search engine? How do you think about that? There's no right or wrong answer, and you can go in so many ways. But that's very interesting because how do you engage with the interviewer? Do you ask
Okay.
questions? Sometimes you've got people that just start answering, like you just literally give them one sentence, please give me a Google please build me a search engine, and they build you a search engine. They have no idea if it's a search engine for on-prem for a company for 10 people, or if you're actually trying to build Google. They don't even ask. So that actually tells you quite a few interesting things. And obviously you can both explore the more kind of behavioral aspect, or how do you would work in a team or with stakeholders, and going quite deep into specifics.
The joy of asking open questions.
Yeah. So one of the things we look at is scalability. How do you think about that? Not necessarily that we're working at a very high scale, but we like people that either can think about that, or if you point out the problem, can say, oh yeah, okay, maybe I don't know like the perfect solution, but I can with my knowledge I could try to assemble something that looks not insane. And then a lot of behavioral questions in the next interviews, such as how did you deal with certain situations in the past? at the end of the day, our process is very similar to what you see at Facebook and Google. And I think we're really trying to index on how do you work with people, the kind of fundamental of writing software, not necessarily the specific of the frameworks of the language. Locally, that's a bit less true for some stuff. For example, right now we're looking for someone quite strong in front-end engineering because we think that we're a bit weak there. But it tends to be a bit more additive than just looking purely, therefore, how do you do React and forgetting everything about the rest. We're still going to ask you, how do you test your code, what great code looks like to you, and those kind of things. And I would say Zoe, I'm sure plenty of companies are saying that, but Zoe is a place where there is generally a very, very good atmosphere, and people support each other. So we are trying very, very hard to hire people like that. And one of the questions I like asking when people reach me is, how did the interview go so far? And the feedback tends to be, people tend to be extremely positive. I had once, and I felt actually very bad about it, both very proud and very bad about it. But once we interviewed a woman who had like 5 years of experience, and she reached match stage, and she's like, I asked her exactly that question, how did that go? And she was like, I this is like the best interview I ever had, and it's the first time, she literally told me, it's the first time that I don't feel judged in the interview, that I feel like
Okay.
I'm actually having a conversation. And I felt so bad for her because I cannot imagine what she went through for the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we're trying to index for, is giving you not just like a long stream of question, but really trying to have a conversation with you and build toward the solutions together.
That's underestimated massively. I think it's a good representation of what you're trying to build internally, but I think the impact that that has on a candidate's experience of you is unbelievable. Like you wouldn't even realize. I think it's massively underestimated. Treat people fairly, have a conversation with someone, understand someone, and like you say, how they think. That will have a great impact. Don't ask them specifics, be open, understand it. That's what I think, anyway.
Yeah, no, we do try to follow that, and we're having some success in some places, and I think in some other places sometimes. Like just recently, we had a candidate that we said actually reached my stage, and I just vetoed the candidate for, because I was not happy with their answer at the behavioral question, and actually that candidate was really, really pissed off and got back to us and say, how could that be that just one person can just veto the whole process, and I did well before? Well, yes, you did well before. We have no problem with your technical skills, but we are looking for something very, very specific also in terms of working with others and people. And actually, I felt quite good when he sent me that email, because I was like, well, that's
Good
just
judgment.
confirmed exactly what I thought from the interview. So he wasn't happy, and I'm sad for that person, but I stand by my decision.
Yeah, good. That's important too. Making a right judgment call. That's protection for you, other people in the team. Good. Okay, we've got a really decent grasp on Zoe. We've got a really decent grasp on where the science starts, the product. If you're listening, go and look at Zoe. Go and look at the products that they offer. Subscribe, get one delivered. Uh, this isn't promo, this isn't commission. I just think it's one of those really cool products that are out there at the moment. Reach out to Julien. They've obviously got some interesting challenges going on. So reach out to those guys if you want to have an impact in the US. We are first day of lockdown. We know all the things that are happening in the US at the moment. We won't go into detail, but go and get a nutrition kit. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, Julian?
I was going to say, go and get your kit. Yes, only if you're in the US, because the kit is not available in the UK. It will probably be next year. But no, as you said, please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. Probably LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach out to me, and just drop me a message saying that you've listened to the podcast, and I will be very happy to just talk to you.
Good. The link will be below in the YouTube section and everything else. And thanks a lot. Like, shares, comments, visibility, thumbs up, love, and all of that good stuff is always welcome. And Julien, absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Same, Elliot. Thank you very much for having me today.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Enginears is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Enginears.io. It's no_. We've also got a website which is Enginears.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.